Okay, here's our picture of Abram and Sarai again. Abram is 86 years old. His wife is 76 years old. And on their own, they decide that Abram should have a child through their servant. Her name is Hagar. She's an Egyptian, by the way. And they have a child, Hagar does, named Ishmael. And then we're going to fast forward in the story. This is going to be Genesis chapter 17. We are 13 years later. So how old is Ishmael, everybody? Oh, great. He's 13 years old. Abram is how old? 99 years old. Because remember, he was 86 when Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. Doing math for you, everybody. Sorry. And then Ishmael is 13 years old. God comes to Abram with his plan. His plan. There's a word there, Isaac. God really wanted Abram and his wife to have their own baby. Surprise. Let's read about it. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between you and me, and will exceedingly multiply you. One thing I would like to point out to you about the Bible is that every now and then when God is speaking, it's going to be capitalized. Let's look at it. It says, I am Almighty God. Walk before me with a capital M and be blameless, and I will make my covenant, capital M. I just want you to see that, okay? So he's telling him, I will make my covenant between you and me, and will exceedingly multiply you. And before we go any further, I'm sure what Abram is thinking, it's just my opinion, is, hey, I already started that. I got a son. There he is. He's 13. His name's Ishmael. I already started a family. Yay! Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, As for me, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer will your name be called Abram, but your name will be Abraham, which means father of nations. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you, capital M, and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you. All the land of Canaan, where you now live as strangers, I will give to you and to your descendants for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Once again, God is giving this amazing blessing. He said, you're going to go into the land of Canaan, and that's going to be your nation. You have many descendants. And Abram's probably thinking, wait, I got a son already. Is it time to start now? I'm confused. Then God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you will not call her name Sarai, but her name will be Sarah, which means princess. I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Let's read that again. I will bless her and also give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man that is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. In other words, he's saying, I already got a son already. We can't have a child. I'm too old. It can't happen, Lord. Then God said, No, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call his name Isaac. Isaac, by the way, means laughter. I will establish my covenant, capital M, with him as an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. I want to pause for a second here. I just want to give you a little teaching point. Isaac is the son that God wanted them to have together. And therefore, look what it says. God said this, not me. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant with him and his descendants after him. I just want to point out to you, and listen carefully, eventually the descendants of Isaac, the one that he makes the covenant with, are all of the Jewish people in the world. Let me say that again. Isaac, all of his descendants are the Jewish people. And that's who the covenant is with. It says right here in the Bible. Ishmael is also going to be great, by the way, according to what God says. But all of the Middle Eastern people in the world who are not Jewish came from Ishmael. That's why, starting at about this time in history, the people in the Middle East have always fought. Isaac's descendants, the Jewish people, and Ishmael's descendants, the Middle Eastern people who are not Jewish. I just want to point that out to you, and you'll see that as we go along. Just want to note that Isaac means laughter, because they laughed apparently when God told them. We'll go to verse 20. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He will be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. And I will establish my covenant with Isaac. But look what it says, 21. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this set time next year. In other words, about 9 months from now, you're going to have the one I'm going to make my covenant with. Ishmael is going to have a big nation too. He's going to have a whole bunch of people under him. That's all the people in the Middle East. But Isaac is the one that he gets the covenant. I cannot say that enough as we go forward. In verse 22 it says, Then God stopped talking with Abraham, and God went up from him. We're going to fast forward to Genesis chapter 21. Tensions mount between Sarah and Hagar after the birth of Isaac. And there's a celebration they have, and the tensions get too high. Eventually Sarah demands that Hagar and Ishmael be expelled from the home. In other words, pretty much the way it reads in the Bible is that Sarah takes her husband inside and says, one of us has got to go. Either she goes or I go. And sadly, Abraham does so. He kicks out Hagar and Ishmael, his first son, and they leave the house. Let's recap what we learned so far about Abraham. It's a lot to learn. First, he misunderstands God, and he produces a son, Ishmael, with an Egyptian maid named Hagar. 13 years later, God appears to Abram and promises a son, Isaac, and then he renames Abram, Abraham, and he also renames Sarai, Sarah. Hagar and Ishmael are eventually expelled from the household, Genesis 21. And I just want to emphasize a third time, because we do everything in threes. Ishmael and Hagar are expelled from this home, and they feel like probably their birthright is now gone. They're not going to inherit all this great stuff from Abraham, even though he was the first son, because they were expelled. And this event here, and a couple of events later on in history, lead to the people in the Middle East being split between the Jewish descendants of Isaac and the other Middle Eastern people who are not Jewish, descendants of Ishmael. Here's a teacher's note. Through Abram's son Isaac, all of their offspring become the Hebrew or Jewish people. Ishmael's offspring become the non-Jewish Middle Eastern culture, and throughout history the two are rival cultures. Think about this, everybody. Even today, those two groups, those two cultures, really despise each other. Here's a quiz. Who decided that Abram should have a child by the maidservant Hagar? You know what the answer is? It wasn't God. It was Abram and his wife Sarai. What was the name of Abram and Hagar's son? The name is Ishmael, which means God hears. How many years later did God tell Abram and Sarai that they would have a son? The answer is 13 years. What was the reaction of Sarai and Abram when God told them they were going to have a son? They laughed, and therefore their baby's name was Isaac, which means laughter. Was God's covenant made through Ishmael or Isaac? I hope you got this. This will be the 5th time we repeat this. God's covenant was with Isaac, not Ishmael. If you didn't get the answer, it's So all of these, go ahead and rewind a little bit if you have to, or send questions in, or just rewind this part and write down the answers. And we'll see you next time.